Ta-da! And right away we're out of focus. Squish your lead. We're live, 7:25. Again, another unfortunate pun. That's part of the deal. Let's see if we can't adjust a little bit. Get some reflectivity going on. Tonight, I want to talk about tuning, not our tunes from Richard Holdner Performance, because we are going to have those, and they should be coming up fairly quickly. I've been on the phone with Jimmy and Joel, and we've been going over stuff, and so that will be good. But I got an interesting comment from a guy, and this is something that happens, every once in a while. It shows, I mean, not a lot, because it shows how prevalent it isn't rather than it is. But the comment was interesting, and I got somebody sent me a message or something and said, "Hey, look, I'm a shop, and somebody just bought one of your cams, and I need all the valve events on the cams." And I'm like, "Well, all the information that we have for the cams are up on the store." He said, "No, I need the actual valve events." I said, "Well, we don't provide those." "Well, I need those because I'm tuning his car." I said, "Well, you 100% don't need valve events to tune a car." And he was very indignant that he needed that. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a thing. I know, because I've tuned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stuff over the last 3 decades by myself now, and also before that with Ernie and Tom and the other guys that were tuning. The guys at West Tech don't even, the Ish and Eric don't ask for valve events when they're tuning stuff. They don't even really care what the motor is. In a lot of cases, they could do it without that. That's not necessary. The same thing with the vast majority, Jimmy and Joel, and like I said, the vast majority of people that I know that do tuning and that I've been around that do tuning, and that's a lot of people because I'm there doing stuff with people and they're doing that tuning, the guys at BTR and stuff. And not once did anybody ever say, "Hey, I need the opening and closing, points for the intake and the exhaust on the camshaft so that I can tune this." And one of his responses, "Well, what happens if I inject fuel, while the valve is hanging open?" I'm like, I just sent him a thing. I said, "Look, we're lucky that we have things called air fuel meters, and you just give it the air fuel that it wants. That becomes the question is, what air fuel do you think it should have?" This is the tuning thing. "Do you think it should have under all of these different conditions?" And then I would argue more importantly is, what timing do you think it should have under all these different, the variable different combinations of, load and RPM and all that stuff? What timing should it have? And then what can it get away with given the amount of temperature that it has, air temperature, water temperature, how susceptible to detonation are the spark plugs or the chamber design, all these things. Getting all that right is difficult. And having seen more and more stuff with factory ECUs, originally I thought, well, maybe that's just a factory ECU thing, that it's a requirement. But having been around a lot of factory ECU guys tuning stuff, I know that that's not a requirement, because I've seen lots and lots of people do it and not have that be an issue. When we do a test, we do a test with EFI, and then we swap cams with it, and then we just add the fuel where it's necessary to make, like if it's an NA motor and we want it to run at, let's say at wide open throttle, we want it to run at 12.8 to 1. We just then, with the new cam, usually if we start with a stock cam and then we put some other kind of camshaft in it, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what the valve events are. If the cam added power and we're tuning a speed density system, we just add fuel so that it continues to be 12.8 if that's what we want. And then we, more often than not, the timing doesn't change, and it still works. Like with an LS, it works at 30 degrees of total timing at the horsepower peak. The timing curve, very rarely do we see any change from power when we put a new camshaft in. Lots of tuner guys will tell you, "Oh yeah, I got to retune all that." Well, you might have to retune it for drivability and things, but you're not going to have to retune it because the chamber design has not changed, and it's still going to want the same timing. And not only want, it's going to respond to that. the timing that you could put in there will be a function of those other things. Like I said, it'll be a function of temperature and what you can get away with given the like knock threshold. So you have to tune around that. You know, I'm tuning around like maximum power for wide open throttle because we can put all the timing in it when we're doing stuff on the engine dyno. And when we're doing stuff on the chassis dyno with Jimmy and Joel, that's a different thing because the amount of timing that we can get away with, we try to run 91. You could tune it on 87 if you wanted and take more timing away and make all that happen. But whether we run a stock cam or a low buck truck camshaft or a truck plus camshaft or any other camshaft for that matter that we would put in there that would fit, we would just tune it so that we had the right air fuel and we had the right timing and we didn't have detonation. And then that would be right. Again, never once asking, hey, what happens if it has this opening point and this closing point? You know, none of that stuff becomes a thing. And I also know, and this is more to the point, that this is not about this back and forth that I was doing with this person was not about tuning. It had nothing to do with that. It was about attitude. It was about, this is the same discussion that you have with somebody that is this is the Coyote versus LS or Ford versus Chevy or you know, whatever. It's one guy having one thing or doing something one way. And then so that's absolute. They have never tested any other way and never tried any other way. Because I've tried changing injector timing. tried it a number of times, both myself and other people that were doing the tuning at the time. I said, hey, can we try this? Because, and I tried it mostly not because I thought it was going to work or wasn't going to work. I wanted to find out, is there anything there? I had been told long ago, decades ago, by some super tuner guys, you know, that know everything. Oh yeah, you can plug in the number that you want there. 5%, 8%, 10% of power by changing the injector timing. On a direct injected motor, those sorts of things can be a reality. On a port injected motor, on an LS, we swung it in both directions, not knowing where it wanted to go, but asking it, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? What do you like? We don't care. We're not trying to tell you what you like. We're just asking you what you like. So we'll try this and this and this and this. And saw little, if any, kind of change at all. And every time we've tried this, that's been the case. We have not seen any sort of significant gains. And all of these tests were with camshafts that were different. We tried it with a stock cam. We tried it with a mild cam. We tried it with a couple of fairly big cams, 230 plus kinds of things, just because that's what we happened to have in there at the time. We've tried it with the different things. I think that they were all LS motors when we tried it. But on the injector timing deal, I think, if I remember right, I have to go back and look through the notes, but I think that there was 5 or 6 times that they were all LS motors. And it didn't ever show anything. And so I just came to the conclusion that, look, that's not an avenue that I want to go down searching, just like piston flipping. I'm not going to go down that avenue because I know that if it ever did show anything, that it would be very minimal. The exception being LT motors and possibly direct injected Coyotes and things like that. No, I'm not saying that it never works, because it certainly does. It certainly works on the direct injected stuff, certainly worked on the direct injected Coyote stuff, maybe on the port injected Coyote stuff. I don't know, because I haven't tested everything. But I do know on the LS with an RHP camshaft on it, you're not going to find that. And having tested the way that I do it and the way that other people do it, having tested carbureted ones that don't take into account cam timing, that having tested all of these different things, different injector positions and all of these things, I can say, look, I'm not stuck over here at only doing something one way. We've tested all the other stuff. And so we've come a bunch of steps beyond that. And so we know that that's not necessary. If you go by the air fuel meter, you're going to be solid on the air fuel. And then experience and other things, and knock sensors hopefully come into play when you start doing timing. And so it was just more of a thing of, hey, this is the way I do it. And if that's the way that the guy does it and he's good at it, that's fantastic. But we all have to realize that that's not the only way. That's not the only thing. You know, if you're a runner and you don't like guys that ride bikes or vice versa, that's too bad. They're both could be good. Both the tuning methods can be good. But what I do know in that discussion is that one of those things isn't mandatory. You don't have to do it that way. You could do it the way that he's talking about. You could do it the way that I'm talking about. I've seen lots of other people do it. And both of those will probably work. But having an attitude about it has to be this way, and then being indignant about it, that you know everything and that nobody else knows anything, when in fact, people that you're talking to may have tested what you do and then also what they do. And so there may be more information there for you to, learn more things. So that's all that. But it's just, and the thing that's funny about all this is that when I do this testing and we try different things, I want them to be things. Like when we did the piston flip thing, I wanted it to be something. I wanted there to be power there. When we tried the injector timing, just like when I had done injector placement, the injector placement definitely made a difference in power. That was awesome. That's what I was hoping we would see from injector timing. And we didn't see that. And then we didn't see it again. And then we didn't see it again. And then we didn't see it again. And so after that, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to keep looking, at least not on an LS. I don't want to keep looking at that to see if there's something there. And then you learn that, hey, look, you don't need that. You don't need that. That's not really a thing. You'll see the thumbnail is upside down. That's me tuning a Holly, not on a factory ECU, but the factory ECU was done and all of that stuff too with Jimmy and Joel. And we should have, I think Jimmy might have these valve spring tools now, because we've tested them and to our liking, and they work very well, and they're should be fairly inexpensive, and it might be a good thing for people that are doing springs and stuff. So that would be a good tool. Tunes, I think, are almost done, and maybe next week, I'm thinking. So that would be good. So, and we'll have, we're going to do a live feed with Jimmy and Joel and myself, and you guys will be able to ask questions and find out, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? Whatever those things are, we'll be able to address all that stuff. And we'll have tunes for our stuff, for our cams, with that kind of cam timing. And then specific injector sizes, and then obviously turbo stuff too, once that kind of comes online, which would be good. Near. Valve vents. Ooh, 96, nailed it. Excuse me. Are the valve events on the cam more important to know than the injector data when tuning an LS? That will be our poll for tonight. Here we go, Gophers. Corvallis, where are valve event secrets for some manufacturers? I never understood. Why are they secret? Map them yourselves. Mississippi's in the house. I have yet to go wrong with Mr. Richard's knowledge. What schools or programs do you recommend for learning how to start tuning? There is stuff online. Ben has stuff. HP Academy has stuff. There's a lot of good ones online. Steve, what's going on? Nice, tough book in the thumbnail. CF31, bulletproof if dated. I know that's, I think that those are, that one might be Westex. They have a bunch of those. And I have one of those too that when Eric was going through and buying a bunch of those, that were refurbished from military or law enforcement or something like that. And then I got one so that I could have my stuff on my own computer. And then now I have another one too, a newer one, not a Tough Books. This is my car, and you're talking about the shop that has my car. Michael Jones. No, you're all good, man. That, like I said, that sort of stuff is not necessary. You're good. Closed-minded. Yeah, you don't want to be closed-minded. If you're open-minded, there's lots of people out there that will help you. But if you're not, it's a lot harder to get help. Injector timing thing. The guy at DFI in Wixom, Michigan used to make that claim that finding 40 horsepower on an engine, I was like, the injectors point out the intake manifold. Timing probably fixes a little, if not enough injector, but nothing that is all right. LQ9 6-liter Ripper Cam O2 Camaro using stock ECU. Yeah, all that's good, man. That's all good. Just get the air fuel right, get the timing right. You're going to be golden. Best time to put fuel in the port is when the injector is closed, honestly. You get better shearing and heating if the valve is hot, and improves fuel shear, almost no power. So would it help with fuel mileage or something? But those kinds of statements to me don't correlate with the stuff that I see on the dyno. Like, they're esoteric things, that like this piston flip thing. Okay, here's an absolute thing, you know, and I get these kinds of things of what angle the injector should be at and all these different things. I'm like, okay, well, but I know that that's the theory, and I know that there's even logic behind the theory, and it might actually be right. But the only way that we know if stuff is right is if we test it. Giant green injectors. Guessing I don't think you need a different tuner. The guy's probably sharp, and that's probably the way that he does it. But it's not mandatory for him to see that stuff. It's not. Nobody else I know, like I was talking about Michael, I have had this question before, but not very often. And we've sold lots of camshafts. And the number of people that ask for that so that they can get that tuned are this guy and one or two other guys. Jimmy said he's heard this before too. But we had to search to figure out who was asking those questions. The altimeter with the ejector aiming and the shearing wall in the port prevents the one issue modular Fords had with fuel wash spot and the non-PIs. I wanted horsepower from facing spark plugs. You only see gains from flipping pistons if you use reverse viscosity oil. Nice. Shattering hopes and dreams. Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to shatter them. I want all of that stuff to be something. I go in with high hopes, and then I come out with data. Those are sometimes different things. Switching to a singularity engine oil in my next engine. The black hole force will improve crankshaft velocity. Changes by imparting negative gravity on the throws. All right. But will it stop it from going back up, though? 6 people watching, 21 likes. Hit the thumbs up button. It costs you nothing. Rich, can you do my tuning? The shop that you're referring to is about my car. I don't do tuning. I'm not the guy to do that. Jimmy and those guys can do that. And we may have a tune for your combination with that cam anyway. I don't know what giant green injectors are, but if you give me the size of them, we probably have injector data for it, and then would therefore have a tune for it. Is an LS-NA engine 24 to 27 degrees, depending on intake and compression, AFR in the mid-12s. Strolling. Used to hang out with all the top builders before web, so grateful to compress all the information. Not ready for the Cat ITO wake up, but Truck Plus is on the kiddies menu. Okay. Where's data for putting different heat range plugs in different holes? What happens to power? You put 2-step colder plugs in the hottest hole. How do you know that that one's hottest? Do you have EGTs in it? And why is there a temperature difference? Is the temperature difference based on timing? Is it based on air fuel? And do you have an attending detonation problem because of the temperature? Those are all questions that I would ask. What I'm saying is the plugs might not do anything. I have done lots of endless spark plug tests and have yet to see anything. We've run the plugs from the wrecking yard with lots of gap, with very little gap. We bring the gap down because we want to run boost in it, and that definitely helps. If you can get rid of, if you have a misfire, that definitely helps. Putting a colder plug in, I don't know that that's the tipping point. Like, what if it's air temperature? What if it's timing? What if it's detonation sensitivity because of the chamber? You know, what the plug, you know, things that the plug's not going to cure. We have tunes for 4.8 carbureted, sloppy stage 2, beehive springs, 243, 150 shot, 410. You have a carbureted motor and you want to tune on it? What ECU do you usually use? And it's easy to learn to tune myself. I don't know about easy, but you have to do a lot of it to learn. I usually use a Holly on the thing, but also now Haltech. I've also done some of the factory stuff. Like with the, what do we use? We used an MS3 Pro on the Atlas motor. Best performance cam for 3rd gen Hemi. I don't know what you mean by best. You gotta be way more specific about that. Do you want the one that makes the most peak power, the most peak torque, the most average power, the one that has a smooth idle? Do you want a stock converter? Yada, yada, yada. Is there data? Sorry, autocorrect came. Is there data on what? Yeah, Baby Shark, I don't know. Any rough time frame for the turbo kit? Nope. Don't know. We're just working on getting all the pieces put together. Just tune for the best torque for a given octane. Move on with your life. I don't care about valve specs other than they don't hit the pistons. Yeah, that's important. Wrong injector data can blow the engine. Yeah, that can become problematic. Southwest Florida checking in. There's almost 11 p.m. Feels like temperature is still 91. Yeah, it's hot here. I think it's only 85 here right now, but it's only, you know, it's 3 hours earlier. I hit the like button, increase the horsepower by 15%. Nice. And just like that. The like button works. That's right. I've tested the, here we go. Test the injector timing on the closed valve. It seemed to help one turbo engine at 1200 horsepower. The gain was inside an error measurement of the dyno at the time. Hard to prove. Yeah, 1200 horsepower is not where I would be testing that because you just can't get repeatability. Michael, happy to help, man. What's up, Richard and crew? Lunch boxes in the house. Cold plug question based on carbonation. like brewskis. Do I need a tune for your carbureted motor? Plug heat temperature range has to do with the heat removal from the chamber. So if it's more about pre-ignition avoidance and detonation suppression, too cold, the plug won't show good heat marks on the strap. Pre-ignition and detonation, yes, are definitely different things. But might have nothing to do with the spark plug. Hugh, the batch fire is no good. Yeah, I tested that too. In what form do the cam timing events come in? I don't know. I'm not even sure what you do to try to change that. I mean, I don't know how you would adjust that because the overlap period in time would change with engine speed. So do you need to be concerned with it at higher engine speeds? Have you tested wrapped or coated headers versus bare? Heard that keeping exhaust hot keeps the velocity up. It would, like on a turbo application. I don't think on NA stuff you're going to see much. How do you think cam specific tuning could affect a dyno cam challenge like Weingart is doing? I don't think it would make any difference at all. I mean, he didn't do a lot of tuning in his thing. I think he ran the one thing like carbureted and didn't make any adjustments to it. So I'm surprised that people weren't losing their mind over that. And I'm not saying that there was a whole bunch of power there, maybe, but you got to find out if there is. But if you were tuning it and you had a camshaft and you wanted to make sure, like if you were going to do that, you're going to do it fuel injected, you'd have to have somebody there that made it, okay, we're going to decide that every one of them is going to run at 12.8 or 13.0 or whatever it is. Because there's always going to be one guy, oh no, mine makes best power 13.2. Yeah. You're going to blow up somebody's motor doing that. The last time I asked before I make a purchase. What is your question about that? You're just listing things off, I see. Could the cam swap and bigger engine cause a misfire with a stock tune and ECM? Yes. You could definitely cause more likely drivability issues. So lean or rich or something because of the mass air signal, probably. I don't know much, but I try to listen to smart people that run tests. Seems like carbs cool the intake more than port injection. Yep, that's true. Also heard the direct injection doesn't clean the intake valves. That's also true. And here's a little throw-in thing for direct injection. It also doesn't inject fuel into the port. So that port of a given size will now flow more air. That can make more power. I came in a little late, but I hear you guys are still, will be offering tunes. Yes, probably as early as next week. So there's going to be canned tunes or custom or both. Right now, they're going to be tunes for our combinations. So Ripper cam on sale right now. Low buck truck camshaft and truck plus camshaft, $100 off on the truck plus camshaft. So you guys all need to go get a truck plus camshaft right now. We'll have tunes for those NA, and then we will also have turbo stuff. Didn't you remove an intake cover with the motor wide open throttle? I've done that a couple of times, actually. We did that on a 4.6 4-valve Cobra motor with a FR500 intake manifold on it that has dual runners. And so we did it when we were running the short runners. Then it was kind of like a little bit like a stack injection when you pull the lid off. And then I also did it to the Performance Design adjustable manifold. We pulled the lid off of that. And then I yanked the lid off of another one too. I'm trying to remember what that one was. I know it wasn't the magnesium intake manifold because I wouldn't have yanked it. One of them we yanked I just tied a rope onto it or a cable or something, and then yanked it from outside the door of the dyno. I don't know why I did that, since once you go to wide open throttle, they're easy just to lift off. They just lift right off. You cannot lift them off when they're at idle and they have that much surface area. But once you go to wide open throttle and there's no vacuum, then you just lift the lid off and it runs like that, and you just shut the dyno off. We'd love to see you do some dyno videos on rear mount turbo setups. I have back-to-back dynos of the same setup. Just add 10 to 15 feet of exhaust before tubing, then test. You should go look at the video that I already did exactly that. We made a really, really long thing to simulate a rear mount turbo. And so you can see what that did. An engineer at GM worked with the CTSV race program, gave me the header coating wrap data. When they tested it, they found no horsepower once the headers were hot, mostly for heat control under hood. Yeah, that definitely is a thing. I mean, I've seen even guys do the gold foil and that stuff on the race cars, mostly because they're trying to save things like, and in the Corvette program, definitely this was a problem. They're trying to save the heat on things like starters and stuff. And so wrapping them definitely is a good idea. And I think that wrapping them might show some gains from a turbo thing. But on an NA thing, I remember when I raced Bridgestone Supercar, and Mark Donahue's kid, David Donahue, was driving one of the BMWs, and their whole exhaust was wrapped, including, this is a 6-cylinder BMW. And all of the header was wrapped all the way back, and they wrapped their exhaust all the way back, trying to get more. I think I honestly think that the weight of all that overcame any sort of exhaust gain that they would have got from that. But, you know, because I know that they were trying to do it for power, not just for temperature. What determines proper spark plugs, temp and gap for your engine? Is it horsepower, compression? Yeah, it's all that. I guess knowing valve events while tuning VVT would be relevant. I don't know that that's actually the case. If you're swinging the camshaft and you have it be the proper air fuel, I don't think that knowing the valve events would be necessary. Can you explain how advancing or retarding a camshaft would change cylinder pressure when you want to advance it? I can't explain what it does to cylinder pressure other than knowing the relationship between adding more power and cylinder pressure. But when a lot of people get confused with the cylinder pressure thing, they think that it adds more peak cylinder pressure, like it goes from 200 to 300, whatever the number is. Forget about what that is, but it just adds more. What it can add, and this is what forced induction normally does, is adds more average cylinder pressure. So it's pushing on the piston more and for a longer period of time. So it has more cylinder pressure, and that makes more power. Because if you just if you doubled the cylinder pressure by doubling the boost, went from no boost to 14.7 pounds, you're running atmosphere and you're running 14.7 pounds, and you keep doing that, and you keep stacking peak cylinder pressure on this thing, you would have real problems. But lucky for us, it doesn't do that. But advancing and retarding the cam, if you advance the cam and it makes more power somewhere, down low usually, or in the middle or somewhere, maybe all the way through the range, whatever, because you didn't have the right cam timing. If you advance the cam and it makes more power, it probably increased cylinder pressure somewhere, more peak, more average, whatever. If you retard it and it makes more power up top, you have also increased cylinder pressure there at that RPM range. Those two things will go together. Power and cylinder pressure will go together. Would the truck bus match up with a 2024 stall and a CTSV with a low buck truck and a stock 6L80 converter? Yes, 2400 would be enough. This is a 6-liter or a 6.2 with that camshaft. Oh yeah, that would be fine. A 2400 is fine. 2000 to 2400 is not. 2000 is a stock converter range. 2400 is not a stock converter range. So which is it? Is it a stock converter or is it not a stock converter? Found a Gen 6 454 in the junkyard and it spins. The last one spun but had a broken rod. It's also in a van. Not fun pulling. No, vans are not good. I heard cam tunes or can tunes, and I think I'm interested. Yeah, can tunes are funny that people think that this tune, this is like cams. I have to have a custom cam. No, you actually don't. You should just buy an off-the-shelf cam. You'll be much happier. And all of the custom cams, all of the shelf cams started out as a custom cam and was tested, and they're like, yeah, this works really well. So we're going to make this, and people are going to like this. And so we got to make a lot of them. We don't want to just make one custom one. We need to make a lot of them. And then we get stuff like BTR's Truck Norris and Chupacabras and all that stuff. FR500 intake is nice. Yeah, there's a couple of different versions of it, but yeah, it was hard to find. I sold it a long time ago. Offering to start tearing it down to make sure the cam dots are lined up. I'll be picking my car up tomorrow with the bill, I'm sure. Thanks for the validation of my thoughts of the misfire. Yeah, happy to help, man. Just like I said, I'm not bad mouthing the guy that was doing that was going to do your tunes. I'm just, I wish I could talk to him and try to help educate him that what he's asking for isn't mandatory. And if he does need that to tune it, it would be good for him to learn another way to tune stuff. That would just be beneficial for his business. Do you know if a VVT cam is bigger or smaller than a non-VVT cam? Well, you have to get very specific about what VVT cams you're talking about. Which ones exactly are you trying to compare? My dad had a small block Chevy work truck where the header pipe was too close to the starter. He once had to spray the starter with Freon to get the starter to work after driving up hills and stopping for gas. The Corvette team had that problem a lot. The headers would cook the starter and they would come in and the thing didn't want to restart. So I had problems with that. They eventually fixed it. This was long ago. Finally home, 61 degrees through the valley on my bike. Having heated grips and seats make me feel spoiled. You have heated seats and heated grip? Can you elaborate on why vans are not good? No, vans are good. They're just hard to take motors out of. That was my point of wrecking yards. It's much easier to take it out of a truck than a van. I put a converter in the CTSV anyway, focus on the transmission lockup and shift points. The engine will be a dog below 4,400 with any cam. Below 4,400? Not a low buck truck, and probably not the Truck Plus either. Not much arch support. Saw 3 small bucks in the ditch. Luckily, they didn't like my headlights or exhaust. Retarding cam increases pressure at the top. Is that something you wouldn't see with cranking compression? You may not. And also, that doesn't always happen. Retarding the cam doesn't universally improve power at the top. Advancing the cam doesn't universally increase power down low or in the middle or all the way through. That's a myth. Because what if the cam already has all the advance that cam timing wants, that the motor wants? Then increasing it, you just start to lose power or make no change in power, because that can also happen. It happened with the LS9 camshaft, which I thought certainly, given how wide the LSA was, that advancing it would help. But what it needed was to bring the LSA together a lot. Expedia.com. Yet to find an engine in the van's worth removing. I've taken lots of them out of vans. So I'm not saying it's not a no-go situation. It's definitely a go situation. It's just more time-consuming and difficult. You have a different outlook on LS cam bearings and possibly pinning them after what happened to your test motor. Seems like way more common on LSs than small block Chevys. I've never seen this happen before. I've pulled, the one time I had a bad bearing was when I was doing that cam test, and that's the only other time I've seen this happen. So I couldn't say from the stuff that I've done that it's common and that you should pin cam bearings. I'll never do that. I mean, I shouldn't say never. I'm not going to do that until that becomes necessary. $900 Corbin seat, $1,500 grips, ZX14. Oh, this is, I thought you were talking about this was a bicycle that you had heated seats on and stuff. Yeah, no, riding motorcycles, because I've done that a lot. I had a GSX-R 750 that I rode up to Northern California from Southern California for Christmas. So we know what cold is. And it rained half the ride, so it was not good. Torque peak with most of the CTSV manifold with most any cam is going to be 4,200 to 4,500 or 3,600 stall is the sweet spot. Why is the LSA so tight on the low buck? Have you seen what forget about the LSA. Have you seen what the power curve looks like on a low buck truck camshaft? That's why all of the valve events and the lift and the duration and the LSA are why they are on that camshaft. That's what makes it do all the stuff that it does. Injector data for sure. You can measure how far off the tune is for the cam easier than a bad injector data. What about dropping the timing a couple of degrees around 4,000 RPM, then back to normal timing? I don't know why are you dropping the ignition timing? That's what you're talking about? So now you're saying get the tightest LSA possible. Not saying that either. That's never, you never heard that come out of my mouth. Just one that has 120 or 121 on an LS9 camshaft. If we brought that down a bit to a more realistic level, probably would improve power where we want it, because that camshaft is pretty soft down low and in the middle. Lots of people are now saying change the cam bearings when you do a cam swap. I haven't heard any of that. What are some good ways to make power with a stock 4.6 3-valve modular, chip boost, headers, intake? Yeah, all of that stuff is possible. Australia's in the house. Did you pull the van engines from the front? I've tried it both ways. I couldn't get into the side, so we ended up cutting the front of the van off. Will the Truck Plus benefit from a tighter LSA? I don't know. You'd have to test that. And streetcars with the LS6 manifold and lots of air. And then that would be subjective. The word benefit would be subjective. What if it made more power down low, but less at the top? What if it only helped in the middle? What if it didn't do anything? I mean, whatever the result was, you would get guys that say, yeah, I like that. And then you'd also get guys that say, no, I don't want that. That's why we have different cams, because people want different things. In streetcars with LS6 manifold and lots of air heating, GM would pull a few degrees of timing with stock converters from 39 to 4500 to prevent spark knock in cylinders 7 and 8 on the 4th gen. They would do it on specific cylinders? What's happening in cylinder 7 and 8 that require specific attention? 416 stroker, 4-inch crank, Frankenstein heads, 11-to-1, mass single plane, 93 with a little additive. What's a little additive? Oh, like octane booster or something? Well, how much power are you trying to make? Both are truly non-essential variables to the tune. If you understand what you're doing, the tune will systematically line itself out. Yeah, I don't, like I said, it's air, fuel, and it's timing. And then on motors that have like variable cam or whatever, you got to tune that too. And you have to tune all the overlapping like tables. And so that's a lot. But it still comes down to air, fuel, and timing. Could you not take the core support off and pull it through the front? That's what we did. We took basically almost the whole front of the van off. We started using Sawzalls. You want to make 600 wheel horsepower NA, so that's going to be a big cam. Maybe that's the stage 4 or 5 400-inch stroker cam from BTR. Probably look at something like that. They just pulled in all the cylinders, but the problem would occur in 7 and 8. They ran a few degrees hotter, stock Cali converters, low stall, and a stick shift. They pulled 3 to 4. Can email a stock Cal. I don't need to see it. I believe you. I just don't know why. I've heard people say 7 and 8 are the problematic cylinders, but nobody's ever told me why. Is it a cylinder head cooling thing? It's not a manifold thing, because I've seen the differences in all the stock manifolds, and they don't lend themselves to that. So I want to know why that is. Is there a theory that the fuel rail is not getting enough fuel there? Is it a temperature problem? I want to know what that is. They run the hottest. It was the hill climb test in Arizona. They get water last and run the hottest, put a temperature sensor in front of the back of the head. They run 20 degrees hotter. Okay. So it's a coolant issue then? So somebody doesn't have a coolant bypass for that, like they do on the Dodges? don't blocks usually feed the water? Don't water pumps usually feed the water to the block and then push it up through the head in the back, and then it comes forward? Isn't so? Wouldn't cylinders 1 and 2, or yeah, 1 and 2 be the problematic ones? Coolant plus exhaust heating plus hot valve issue. Once you take converters off, the problem goes away. That's interesting. I'd like now I want to go look at the coolant routing. I want to see if there are problems with like coolant at the exhaust or something like that. I don't want to see that. How's our poll doing? Are the valve events of the cam more important to know than the injector data when tuning an LS? 68% are saying no. They're leaning toward the injector data. Fills entire block front to back, then up through the head gasket, then down at the front. So all the colder waters at the front then? Fills the block from front to back, then up through the head gasket. Does the head gasket have holes in it? It does have holes in it the whole length of the block then, right? Then the water could come up into the head from the block at any point in the block, right? Interesting. Interesting. Good stuff. Good stuff. See, that's why we come here. Come here to learn stuff. Near. Yeah, I guess it would be almost no matter how they run it, it would be difficult to get it to have even cooling. Distribution is pretty good. Still stalls toward the rear. Steve Morse is reporting better temps with this new 5.3 big bore closed deck block. Seems logical on its face. Is the whole block filled? Reverse pump flow maybe, or maybe externally filling the rear also. Some even have suspiciously small holes. I expect to force even more flow around each cylinder. Yeah, I'm sure that they map all that. They're really good about that. I've seen the way that they do mapping for temperature, and it's like hundreds of, of like type K thermocouples in a cylinder head or in the block, and it's amazing. And it's very, very cool, all of the data that they get. He's milling out the sleeves and then the deck and welding and a closed deck plate with new sleeves, dry decking the engine. Okay. Is he doing what Darton does to sleeving it? Is it the same thing? Valve events and injector data. I honestly have never looked at injector data either, but I've only ever used, well, not only, primarily used aftermarket ECUs, so it's not really a thing. We still just go by the air fuel meter. Wanting valve vent sounds like somebody wanting to copy a cam. Don't need that info for building tuning until you're running alcohol fuels, 4 to 5 digit power levels. Yeah, I just, you know, I want to help people, but sometimes you can't. Darton takes our stock sleeve and puts in a wet sleeve. He is completely replacing the block deck. Okay. Chevy blocked the rear coolant passage in the early LS design. I don't know. I don't know enough about the coolant changes. I know when I was looking at these couple of projects that I wanted to work on, that head gasket availability for these unique things and cooling was an issue. And then I just decided, well, we're just going to drill holes in the heads and run it through there, and that'll work fine. Have you watched any of racing videos on LSA where you discuss forming for computing optimal LSA? I've seen Vizard stuff, and that formula is for a small block Chevy. It's not optimum LSA for everything. And again, there's no optimum LSA. That's a myth, because the ideal camshaft is not going to be, for every person, is not going to be what any formula generates. And I had a very, very long discussion with David Vizard about that. I said, David, stop with your formula. Here's why that won't work. And this is why people that are in the business of selling cams sell so many more cams than you sell, because you don't understand that the customer gets what the customer wants. What they want is the optimum cam, not what your formula says. So it doesn't make any difference. I don't agree that his formula gives us an optimum cam anyways. And I love David. He's great. I love listening to his stories, but I don't believe it does that. But even if it did, that doesn't matter, because guys are going to buy a Truck Plus cam or a low buck truck camshaft or a Truck Norris or a Chupacabra or what a stage 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. They're going to buy all these other cams that have nothing to do with that, because that's not what they want. Whatever that thing generated is not necessarily what they want. And you have to recognize that. Both cam timing events and injector data are important. Not for tuning, they're not. They made one head design and opened the fronts for steam mitigation. I run the 4-corner steam pipe setup on my motor. It helps. GM has it on trucks, rich engine, and Corvetters, depending on the intake cam, 2-port front for steam. Yeah, a lot of them I've seen on the later ones have actual plugs in the back, not just the bolt-on ones, but actually press-in plugs in those in some of the heads, making the heads like not, interchangeable anymore if you want those in the back. And then we normally just have the ones that bolt in. I never run the steam things we just run a crossover and cap both of them. When we run stuff on the dyno, I've not done that. Just want to thank you for all the work I've done. I built a 5.3, a Truck Norris cam, 66C10. It feels good. It rips. Thanks for all you do. These are instrumental in my truck. I'm happy that you're happy and that's worked out. That it's hard to go wrong by recommending that particular camshaft for a guy who's driving something on the street. It has enough chop. It's, it makes good power. I've not had somebody be unhappy with that. Camshaft LSA testing really requires tuning to the induction system for maximum benefits and an overlap degree. It's not an angle, but a relationship in terms of port flow, engine speed, chamber shape. Yeah. Here's what I can tell you. If you take an intake manifold and it's a short runner intake manifold, and you make it longer, like I've made adjustable manifolds, no matter what camshaft you team that with, it does the same thing. The short runner manifold makes more power at the top, and the long runner manifold makes more power down low. And the down low and up top is a relative thing, wherever that crossover point is. It does that with a stock cam. It does that with a mild cam. Does that with a medium-sized cam. Does that with a big cam. Does that with every cam. So this optimization thing, I think, again, is, I don't know that it's possible. Block offs in the rear. I have an LM7 with a Brawler 750 single plane intake, long tube headers. Would that be around 350 at the crank? This is my first swap. Do you have a stock LM7? Does it no camshaft is in it? Corvette Rolex race team use 43 steam port setups. For some of the auto stuff like closed loop, the injector data matters a little, definitely more than getting VE just right for the cam trims or percentages. Bad injector data can cause offsets. No simple equation for LSA. That's my point. I agree. I don't think anybody can tell you what that is. And I remember having this conversation with people about camshafts and having the cam experts tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, look, you can design camshafts. You know more about camshafts than I ever will, these camshaft experts. I said, but you can't tell me whatever cam design you're doing on your computer, you can't tell me what that cam's going to make at 3,700 RPM. You can't do that. And I can do that, but you can't, because I've already tested it. That's how I know. But you would only speculate about it because you don't have the data. I said, so, all of this cam stuff, until you test it, you don't really know. And they get mad when I tell them that. Which one holds more power, Turbo 400 or 350? A Turbo 400 by a lot. Stock cam, is it 350? Yeah, a bone stock 5.3 run on the dyno the way that we run it makes like 350. A single plane manifold is actually going to make less power than the truck manifold does. So, but it still will probably make somewhere near that. On later G4 engines, minus count as a 3.5. If people want the steam pipes, they can drill and remove the plugs. Are the hooker turbo manifolds good for 800 or 900 horsepower? Yes. Yeah, they'll do that. We've done that or more than that. They just start getting restrictive because of the way that they did the merge on them. If you're talking about their setup where they feed the one side into the other, and then the other side has the merge one kind of under the other, and then they both exit into a single 3-inch. If that's the one you're talking about, yeah, I have videos up on it where we ran it. Replace my super tired TBI 350 with an LM7. That should be a lot better than a tune port manifold. I mean, a lot better than a tune port motor. It's actually going to make not as much way down low, but it will be better. It will definitely be better. 706 ported with valves, with a valve upgrade versus a 243 on a 5.3 cam only. On a 5.3 cam only, a 706 by itself is going to be better than a 243. So if you do a valve, if you do a bigger valve and you do the valve job right, the 706 head still is going to win. You ran out of characters, Sean? Yeah. Yeah. Did you study my HPT file? I don't think that I did. You're trying to turbo a 2-stroke, okay? It seems like most shelf cams have a wide LSA to avoid piston to valve issues. But you wouldn't have piston to valve issues with a tight LSA if you didn't have duration, because all of that stuff needs to be together. 706 heads are good then. That's what I have. Yes, 706 heads are very good for a 4.8 or a 5.3. Testing this problem I have with Chris Straub. What is, I've heard that name before. What does he do, or what doesn't he do? I mean, somebody let me know who he is. I actually think cannon valve benefits more from overlap because they don't have as much cross communication at the seat like a wedge or Hemi. That's an interesting theory. I'd like to see data on that. I think that they, and by that same token, they probably would want different header configurations too. Are the valve events on the cam more important to know than injector data when tuning in LS? 70%, 69% are saying no. So we'll get rid of the poll there. We've got 1 more minute. Not experienced with tuning in that way. Hopefully that will change when I get. Yeah, I'm just learning some of this stuff. Makes cams, custom cams. Okay. Who makes the best 103 millimeter throttle body? Well, Holly makes 105, so right away that's going to be better. Chris Traub has a performance company in Tennessee. The Hemi wedge canted overlap testing would be impossible, but I suppose it could be done with enough money. He's a cam god on Facebook. I don't I don't put anybody down. I don't know him. I don't know what he does. And like I said, there's lots of guys out there that are really, really sharp on cam design. But cam design and cam sales are not the same thing. We offer tuning for the turbo kits. Yes, we already have the tunes done on the turbo kit because we have already extensively tested the turbo kit. He's the new Pat G. Okay. I remember hearing the Pat G stuff from Brian way back in the day. I remember running one of his cams. It made a lot of power, but it made a lot of power because it was big. It just barely fit available piston to valve clearance. When everyone with a DCR calculator sold camshafts. So that's what they were going by, was dynamic compression. I mean, the cam calculator for that Summit has up should be really good for a lot of people. The problem though is somebody doing, and this is a problem I've had with guys even when I'm talking, because you know when I'm talking about camshafts, I'm like, look, if you're building a pro mod motor, then you go do a custom cam for that, and then you look like a hero. Oh, this thing made 2,500 horsepower. Well, how much turbo did it have on it? Well, that's 2,500 horsepower with the turbos. Okay. Did you try any other cams? No. Okay. I'm not saying it didn't work. It did work. But you really don't know if it worked well against some other kind of cam until you test it against some other kind of cam. Again, people don't like being reminded of that. But the more data you can do, the more information you could get. The problem is that camshaft testing is very, very expensive. I know, because I've done a lot of it. And so it would be great to test cams and test lots and lots of different versions of the cam to find out, okay, which one works best. But again, here's what you're going to find. Here's a little inside information. Find a cam, you're altering the cam events, and you find out that you get to a point where, hey, we're really close here. Now we're trading. Okay, this one can make more peak power, but it loses power down here. This one makes more power down here, but it loses peak power. Which one of those do you want? Very rarely do you find a camshaft where, oh, look, this is like 12 or 15 better everywhere. Those days of finding that for like LS cams, I think are behind us. I still want people like BTR and Texas Speed and everybody, Cam Motion, and everybody to continue testing. The guys at Summit, to if they do lots of testing, to do testing and test the cams and show the data and show that stuff. If they find that, that's fantastic. I just think if you look at a 212 camshaft right now, that I don't know what kind of combination of 212 and then something else that hasn't been tested. You know, I don't know what other magic thing is there to try to find something, or a 219 or a 225 or 231 or whatever. I don't know what other thing hasn't been tried. You know, I hope that there's more stuff, but I don't know that there's any big stuff that we're going to find. What's your opinion on best cam for performance of trying to reach 500 horsepower in a 347? You're going to need a really pretty good sized cam in a 347 Ford and really good cylinder heads to do that. Probably easier to do now that we have a high ram that put on that to make it. They don't like hearing how important testing is that they do. Yeah, and I'm all for, because they're real sophisticated software programs. But the people that use those also use Spintron and dyno testing. Ultimately, you have to dyno test it and see if it works. Because if it doesn't, then you got to go back and tweak your program. Yeah, free valve is not commercially available. Cams are clocking away for the mechanical side of things. The ECU controlling the spark injectors is the electronic clock. Doesn't Visor claim that he tested many versions of a cam on the same engine? He has done lots of small block Chevy testing, which is what that formula is from. Isn't that claim, if you get LSA right, then you get better power through the range as opposed to more power up top? I don't really know what you're saying there. I don't know if you're saying that you're trading power up top for more power down low. But what if the guy wants more peak power? That's what I'm saying. I don't know what if you're making an absolute claim, I disagree with it. I disagree with you on the fact that any formula can give you an absolute best cam. I 100% disagree with that. And I've told David that. Because the absolute best cam is subjective. Another trade-off now is the engine makes more power, destroys the valve seats, or heats valve springs up a bunch. Yeah, there are ways to make the cam lobe very, very aggressive and very unstable and actually make more power. But it chews up parts. It's not good. If anyone wants the cam specs out of my 8200 short runner turbo 427, 244, 248. Chris said he doesn't dyno test, said there's no reason to. Said no professional engine builder ever, or race team, or OEM, or anybody. Small block Chevy has bad heads and overlap might help more. Definitely depends on the power level you want to achieve. Up to a certain level, stock seats are okay. Then a metallurgist is really needed for outside of that power level. I vote for the best street cam award goes to the Truck Norris. I don't know what it is, but I would be interested to see what the sales are on that cam versus any other LS cam. The only other one I think would be in contention in terms of sales volume, I would think, or popularity, would be the Sloppy Stage 2. And I'd be curious to see how those two like battled it out. Again, different cams. The Sloppy Stage 2 makes more peak power. The Trek Norris makes more power through most of the curve. People want different things. I mean, you know, that's cool stuff. On that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. It's Friday, right? Tomorrow's Friday. Yeah, we got some cool things happening tomorrow. I got my fingers crossed. Already got good news today about it. So it's kind of awesome, but I'll maybe talk about that a little bit tomorrow.